Welcome, everybody. This is our virtual plant clinic preparing for spring. My name is Daniel Kapp. For those of you who have are regular attendees here, I'm not Sally. Sally couldn't be with us today. For those of you who this is your first time, this is a Zoom webinar instead of a Zoom meeting. So we will not be able to see you or hear you, but we will be having some question and answer sessions throughout the webinar at certain times. David will let us know. But if you have questions, you can write them in our chat box or our Q&A tab, which is probably at the bottom of your screen. And so just write your questions and then I will ask them for you for David. I think that is pretty much most of the housekeeping that we have. So I think we should just dive right into it. So we have David Yost here, who is one of our top plant clinicians here at Merrifield Garden Center. Been with us for how many years now, David?
26 years now.
6 years. So that's great. I remember when you came. But anyway, so
you're pretty small when I
was probably about 10 or 11 back in the day, but I do remember you. All right. Well, without any further ado, I'm going to let you take it away. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining me today for the plant clinic, the virtual plant clinic. And like I said, since the last time we spoke, we've had some freezing temperatures. So a lot of things really have in the growing season really have sort of come to a close. The leaves have started shedding and it's starting to really feel like we're moving into winter, waking up with the frost out and all that. So I'm going to talk about a few things today. I don't like to think of it as closing down the garden for winter, but I'm presenting more in what I call more positive, forward-looking way of saying getting prepared for spring. As Daniel mentioned, I try to take questions throughout the entire program, which is only 45 minutes, but gives us a chance to hear from each other and keeps it casual, keeps things easy the way I like it. If you've been to our garden center recently, we're pretty much moving over into Christmas shop territory now, where everybody's really working hard to get things set up. We're not 100% of the way there, but poinsettias just came in, as you can see this week. Some Christmas trees just arrived this week. We've got our display set up. So like I said, the gardening season is not over. There's still plenty to do, as we're going to talk about. But a lot of our attention does start turning more spending time indoors and getting prepared for the holidays and all that wonderful part of the year as well. So without any further ado, I am just going to jump right into a couple pictures, kind of get us on the way here. So as I mentioned, I look at this really in terms of preparing for spring. In gardening, I feel like one of the key things that we really need to do to be thinking, to be successful is, as I always say, we're enjoying the moment. We're absolutely enjoying the moment that we have, that particular day and moment. But at the same time, we're always looking ahead and thinking to the next season. So for example, this is an early spring picture that you can see here. If you want to have a really nice, beautiful green lawn like this next spring, there's some steps and things that we need to be doing today to get us prepared for that. If you want to have a garden for beautiful spring bulbs, then that's stuff that we need to get working on today. Of having the beds nicely edged, mulch, and your landscape looking great. These are all things that we can be doing now in the fall of the year. So really we're set up for the next season. So as I said, today we're talking about stuff that you can do in your garden. It really should get done this month. I'm going to say before the 1st of December. So stuff that you can put to work over the next couple of weeks so that we be much, much better prepared and looking better when the spring does arrive. So I'm going to talk about each of these individually. I'm going to talk about lawns, and then we'll talk a little bit about lawns. We'll talk about bulbs, and then we'll take some questions about bulbs. We'll talk about some general garden cleanup, and we can always take questions on that. But really, anything that comes to mind, please share with us today. So let's think spring. Regarding lawns, it's been a little while since I've subjected you all to this chart. It really is my favorite graphic regarding fall lawn care or cool season grasses of all time. I gave it a rest for a while, but decided it was time to come back to it. So this chart, what we're doing is this green line. You might see this little green line here. This is to represent what's happening above ground, what I'm calling the shoot growth that's in there. This black line that we see is representative of the root growth, what we don't see, but what's going on below ground. And then this kind of blue turquoise line is where the plant is storing carbohydrates. So that's kind of our chart. And again, we're looking around, you see fall, winter, spring, summer. So right now, today, we are still in fall. We're kind of in this latter part of fall as we move into winter. And I'm always emphasizing, most of us are growing cool season grasses. They are adapted to much colder climates. They really thrive and do their best at temperatures of about 50 to 75 degrees and moist conditions. So right now in the fall of the year, the cool temperatures is where everything looks great, and we need to be getting our lawn looking its best now so that it's better ready to face the stresses of next summer. So what happens is plants, they are accumulating carbohydrates. They're storing up food reserves in the crown and in the roots of the plant in the form of carbohydrates. Because what the plant is doing, what your lawn is doing, is it's actually building these carbohydrates, this blue line, and it's storing those carbohydrates down in the roots. So the accumulation of food, the development of the roots happens right now, because what the plant did is when the days are getting shorter and everything in late summer, you didn't see it, but it actually sets a little flower bud. We don't think of our lawn as a flowering plant, but it absolutely is. So what the plant is doing is it's initiated this little flower bud, and now it's storing food reserves. It's just building up. Think of this almost like a mammal putting on fat for winter hibernation. So it's building up these carbohydrates in there. And it's so important because we want to build a deep, healthy, resilient root system. That's why this is the time of year that we really fertilize our lawns. So we want to fertilize our lawns to build this root system, because that growth is happening. You just don't see it. It's below ground. What you do see above ground, right, is your lawn's basically shut down. For most of us, we put a final cut on there around Thanksgiving, so right about this time of year, we'll put a final cut on there, might clean things up, put our lawnmower away, and figure that's it for the year. But like I said, we go through the winter time, not a whole lot happening. When we get to spring, when we hit April, this suddenly flips. Now the days are getting longer, the temperatures are getting warmer, and the plant suddenly builds up this above ground. We suddenly start seeing your grass grow. So most of the above ground growth is taking place in April right up to about the middle part of May. So all these carbohydrates that the plant's been developing in the root system kind of flips itself over next spring, and all that stored energy starts going into the vegetative growth that we see above ground. So we're always trying to get people to fertilize now at this time of year. As I said, we really want to get that fertilizer done before the 1st of December, because we want to get those nutrients into the ground before there's any risk of that ground freezing. So this is something you can and should be doing right now. In terms of what fertilizer to use, I'm going to suggest the Merrifield Premium. This is our custom blended fertilizer. It's an excellent choice of lawn fertilizer. It's 50% slow release. So what that means, you can't really see it with this small print. This bag is 26% nitrogen. So this is a pretty high percentage of nitrogen, but it breaks down slowly over a period of several weeks. So when you put that down, 50% of that nitrogen is immediately available to the plant. You get this quick response out of it. The balance of it breaks down over a period of several weeks. and that gives us extended time for the plant to absorb it, a longer green up. You'll see better coloration over the fall and this winter in there, and better spring green up, because I said that plant's building and storing it all in the roots. So let's try to get that done sometime in the next couple of weeks. It's there. In terms of how much to use, there's not an exact answer on this. Much of this is dictated by what your expectations are. It's not really a question of lawn health. A lot of times people associate with this the health of the turf. If the lawn gets fertilized just at least once in the fall time period, that one application is enough to sustain the health of the plant. But this is what we're calling our minimum or lowest application rate. If I want to be like Better Home and Garden Lawn, pride in the neighborhood, and this is, you're really passionate about it, then you might be fertilizing lawn 3 times. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble following my cursor there. But so if I'm on a fall fertilizer program, and this would all be, say, using the Merrifield Premium, you could fertilize it once in September, once in October, once in November. So frequently what we are trying to guide you when you come into the plant clinic at Merrifield Garden Center, we're suggesting maybe you fertilize it twice in the fall and once in the spring. So this is kind of just that middle of the road thing. So again, fertilize it. If it's all we really have is time to get that one application down, but this is what I talk about when I say fall fertilizer. Really, as we are frequently saying, fertilizing twice in the fall and once in the spring. Cool. One last thing I'm going to say, really, we're saying in the context of lawns that this could be anywhere. There are winter annual weeds. So we always think of weeds as being in the summertime, but there are weeds that grow in the wintertime. So just like I was talking about how lawns thrive at that 50 to 75 degrees and they're growing now and building their roots and everything, there are also other plants that what I'm referring to as these weeds. So these are 3 of the most common ones. If you are out looking around in your garden beds or in bare or thin spots in your lawn, you might encounter these tiny, tiny little seedlings that we see here. They're so tiny you don't recognize them. But these are winter weeds that are starting to grow now. They actually started growing about 6 weeks ago. And next spring, they're going to reach their reproductive phase. They're going to go into their flowering stage, and you're going to start to see all these type of things pop up. The chickweed, the bittercress, the dead nettle. And when it starts showing up and you start coming in the clinic saying, where did this come from? This just suddenly appeared out of nowhere. I'm saying, no, it's there. It's been kind of hunkered down, little seedling stage through the fall, the winter, the early spring. And then suddenly we get to March, April, nice weather, they pop up and reveal themselves. So if you wanted to do some weed control, if you run across there and you see these, you can still do it, but this is very temperature dependent. The weed killer products, it really needs to be about 50 degrees or warmer for them to do their best. Just a couple that I brought to show you is like this weed free zone. This is one that can work at temperatures as low as 40 degrees, but I'd rather see it closer to 50. So something like a weed free zone, if you see a break in the weather and it looks like it's going to be kind of in that 40 to 50 degree temperature range for a few days with no rain in immediate sight, you could tackle a few weed problems. And we talked about this in detail if you come into the store. This one, Weed Beater FE, is an organic option for people that are not interested in going down chemical route. Again, this is pretty much independent of temperatures or like I say, as long as we're above 40. So that's a lot of stuff put out there. Let's take a little quick break and see if we have any questions coming in.
All right. So we don't have any, we do have questions, not really any for lawns, but I did just get one for lawns. We'll do the long ones first, and then we'll get some of the other ones. But can we get rid of weeds by smothering them with cardboard?
So that would definitely work in a garden environment clearly we could not do that in a lawn environment because we'd be killing the turf also. But yeah, a lot of people do that. Like if you're getting a new bed prepared, or if it's a vegetable garden that's blank, or not in use for the winter, literally just smothering them under cardboard works quite well.
Gotcha. And then another grass one that just came in. When would be the best time to kill off invasive Bermuda grass?
So that really needs to be done during the growing season. Bermuda grass is it's the exact opposite of our turf grass. Bermuda grass is a warm season grass. It's not really, doesn't come out of dormancy. It doesn't start growing till our temperatures are probably 75 to 80 degrees. And it's really going great, even up to 100. So right now it's in a dormant resting state. And the only thing you could do would be to physically dig it out of there, pull it out of there and remove it. Otherwise, that's something we have to wait and tackle next summer when it's actively growing. So, make sure you get in touch with us, but that's probably more of a project for like June, July, that time period.
Gotcha. That weed killer that you're holding, was that Speed Zone?
It's very, very similar. Speed Zone was a commercial product, and so they that's only available in concentrate in large quantities, but we do have Speed Zone. This I was just showing is called Weed Free Zone. You can see they're obviously kind of trying to copycat their name that's in there. It's very similar chemistry. It's not the same thing, but the nice thing is this is available in little squirt bottle and small retail sizes. But again, we do have Speed Zone in stock, and there's a couple others. That's almost why I hate showing these products. It's better if we talk to you about that
in person.
Both of these work at the lower temperatures of about down to 40 degrees, though.
Gotcha. Somewhat grass lawn adjacent, but somebody has a muddy, very shady area that's looking for a ground cover. What would you recommend for that?
One of my favorite ground covers for shade is dwarf mondo grass. It looks very much like grass. It grows very tight, very dense together. The thing that limits us on it is that you don't grow from seed. You actually have to buy a tray that might have like 50 plants in it. Put these little plugs in there. It's kind of a slow grower. It takes some time to knit together. But once you do that, you've got a very durable, low maintenance, shade tolerant, low ground cover. Only grows about 3 inches tall. I use that in my own yard because I don't want to grow grass, and it's a shade environment and a small area, and the mondo grass has been a perfect option on that.
Gotcha. In relation to that, what about Pachysandra? How do you
Pachysandra, also the thing I guess I was thinking about mondo grass is because it kind of looks like grass, and we're talking about grass as a lawn alternative. Mondo grass is shorter, what they call the dwarf mondo grass is, but Pachysandra also very shade tolerant, evergreen ground cover that could be considered.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then how about Japanese stilt grass? Should anything be done with Japanese stilt grass in the fall or winter?
It's really too late for that. The freezing temperatures we've had basically kills the stilt grass, so it's dead. It's gone. No mas. However, the rest of the story, each plant can produce up to 1,000 seeds, and those seeds can remain viable in the soil for up to at least 5 years. So even though the stilt grass is gone, that seed bank has been replenished. So there's enough seed there to keep it going for several more years. Again, that's something that we would have to manage next spring by putting down a preventer, trying to get ahead of that and doing a preventative application in March, because it does start up pretty early in the year. Mm-hmm. But for today, no, there's not much you can do, but put it on your to-do list for next spring.
Gotcha. I know we're probably want to keep going, but let's see. We'll do one more with that. Going back to the ground covers, would now be a good time to plant it, or should they wait till spring?
You can certainly plant it now. Sometimes I have reservations about it, and every single one of you comes in the store, you'll hear me talk about this, is what your plan is for winter watering, particularly evergreens. And whether we're talking about a ground cover or a shrub or anything else, they're transpiring, right? They're losing moisture through their leaves year round. In general terms, we have very moist, wet winters, and we can put stuff in the fall, and we really don't have an issue with it drying out. But every once in a while, we will get into these dry spells, and if it's wintertime and a few weeks have gone by and it's cold, dry, windy, you have to have some mechanism in place to go out and water the plants. So 90% of the winter damage that we see is not from the cold temperatures. So I don't have any hesitation about the cold hardiness, but I have some reservations about our customers, your ability to maintain the moisture. So that's my only qualifier. I kind of just plant that. I would say, go for it, plant it, be fine, but you also take ownership of the watering on it.
Sounds good. Do you want to answer more questions, or?
No, let's talk about bulbs. I only have a couple little pictures here and there's plenty of time for questions. So, because I'm tired of talking about grass myself. So I want to talk about flowers and bulbs. It's been really, really just so rewarding to me the last few weeks. I think things were kind of a little slow in the store. Bulbs are sitting here, but starting about 3 weeks ago, I started having tons of people coming in and asking about and buying and purchasing bulbs. And a lot of you that I've been talking with are new homeowners, have never done any gardening before, but just getting excited about bulbs. And I love, 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 love seeing people, and these people of all ages, showing an interest in gardening. And I don't know that there's a better place than you get started than by planting bulbs. So you can see a little tulip bulb that I have in here. What's so cool about it is this is like an entire plant, all packed up, just ready to go, waiting to bloom next spring. All you have to do is dig a hole and drop it in the ground. So it's a fun place to start. It's reliable, it's easy, very rewarding. And so what I'm telling you is, when we look at a bulb, I'm just my little tulip bulb as an example. If you're to dissect it in there, what a bulb is you actually have this little embryonic flower. If you open this up, you would cut this and you'd actually see a little miniature tulip flower encased in there. The leaves on that have become modified. They're thick and fleshy like this. This is how the plant stores food for itself. Again, so this is like the flower, the stem, the leaves in here. It's got food packed up in here, just like you're getting ready to go on a vacation or a camping trip. From the bottom here, we call this basal plate. The roots are going to emerge out from there. And then the tunic is what they call, basically it's the skin, it's the outer cover to help preserve and contain moisture. So I think bulbs are so cool because it's like the entire plant wrapped itself up in this little papery envelope, and it's packed up, and all it's doing is waiting for you to go stick them in the ground. We do that now because these bulbs actually require a chilling period. They're going to require a number of weeks. In this case, if I'm talking about tulip, this will require at least about 8, 10, maybe even 12 weeks of time in the ground. This is how it kind of monitors or times itself. You plant it today, the roots emerge out of here, it gets itself rooted. You'll even see this little shoot come up, and it might poke its head up out of the ground, and you start getting alarmed. Don't worry about that. The flower will not emerge until it has met what we call its chilling requirement. So again, this is something that we really need to get in the ground before Christmas, so it's not as much urgency, but we get them in the ground, their roots are growing, their roots are getting established, the plant's basically getting set up. So after it has met its 8, 10, 12-week chilling requirements, wherever they are, it will pop up and give us beautiful blooms in spring. And there's so many ways that we can use bulbs. Here you can see sort of put together in a big group planting, gives us a lot of pizzazz, a lot of show, and really greets us early in the season, you know, when we're really looking forward to spring. What I like to do more than that, my favorite way is I will just plant them in groupings. So I call little bouquets. I put little clumps. It might be a grouping of 3, 5, 7. But I put groupings throughout the garden just so I can have them come up and enjoy that little, the beauty of spring coming in. See, the thing is with bulbs, they might look really nice for a week or two. So they don't, the flower doesn't persist for a long time. So I don't like to build a garden around bulbs like you might see in more formal plantings, but use bulbs more as an accent within our landscape. They are also terrific when used in containers. And by the way, these are pictures in Peggy's home. I don't have such a beautiful garden, but I still have bulbs, still plant some in there. And here what Peggy is really does so much of is she plants them in containers. Again, this is all stuff that you do now in the fall, overwinter them in container. And then when they begin to emerge and flower in spring, she can place that color where she wants it, enjoy the beauty of them. And once their kind of flowers start to fade, they're easy to kind of set aside and wait for the next year. So I say they're so easy. The one thing that we do have to deal with sometimes really is wildlife, because chipmunks and squirrels and voles like to eat the bulbs. You know, as they start to come up in spring, sometimes deer might be an issue. So if you are in an environment where wildlife is a consideration, there's a couple things that you can do. One of my favorites is this material that's called Vole Block, VOLEBLOCK, or Permatil, different names for the same product. What I'm trying to show in here is this is like a very small gravel. It's slate that is excavated just down North Carolina. So it's just rock, it's stone. There's no chemicals or anything treated with it. But they take this stone, they put it in furnace under very high temperatures. And so it fractures up into like this little gritty looking lava rock that helps to aid the aeration and enhance the drainage in the soil. But also it helps protect the bulbs from little burrowing animals that just don't seem to like the gritty texture of it. Another direction that you can take is to spray the bulbs with a repellent. This is one I put there because they advertise that they use as a bulb dip. But this I Must Garden squirrel repellent is just one of several good ones. Nothing at all poisonous or toxic in here. Again, these are things that's got you know, like hot pepper and citronella oil and lemongrass oil and other essential plant oils that's in there, basically just leave a nasty smell and taste. You can spray this directly on the bulbs, let it dry, and then plant them in the ground. And then after that, I like to also treat the surface of the soil because they have it, you know, in granular forms as well. I think I brought that in my little show and tell. So this is a granular one. Can't hear it, but you can get that either as a spray or a dust or powder if you have trouble with wildlife. Otherwise, like I said, this is just about foolproof. So again, let me stop talking for a minute and hear from you guys. Any thoughts, questions about bulbs or anything else we've talked about?
Yes, sir. All right. So for starters, how does the bulb's tunic differ from its scales?
The scales, and again, these are kind of the technical words there and there. The tunic is this papery coating, you know, that you can see just peel off. Again, I had a customer who was in here last weekend. They were new to bulbs. And her husband was concerned, and he was peeling all this, what we call the tunic. He's peeling this off. And I told her, don't do that. Stop doing that. That's how this is what helps to keep moisture in the bulb, protect it from drying out. And even as we're talking, she's like, keeps picking at it. I'm like, stop that, stop that. It's like picking at a scab or something. You know, you want to, but leave it on there if you can. Now your bulbs are still viable like this, but that tunic is there to help cover. These are the actual scales, this white part that's in here. And if you cut this open kind of like layers of an onion, you know, each one of those layers would be referred to as the scale. And that is actually where moisture, nutrients, carbohydrates, everything that this plant needs, the food that it needs to grow next year is all packed into here. So that's a long answer to an easy question.
Gotcha. So we talked about the bulbs and squirrels and everything. If a bulb does get dug up and eaten horizontally by, say, a squirrel, or maybe it got hit by a shovel by mistake, can it survive for the spring season?
It can. Now there's a thing I'm going to say, like if you remember inside here, there's actually a little embryonic flower. If it gets chopped, damaged, chewed, eaten, where that little, all the way down to where that little embryonic flower is injured, then it's pretty much done. It's not going to be able to produce anything for you. The bulb might live because, again, I'm pulling this one apart, what we call the basal plate on the bottom. And again, this is pointed side up, but on the bottom, we call this basal plate. This is really a critical part because that's where the roots grow from. That's where the, you know, the real growth points are from there. So we don't want to injure this part. This is more susceptible to damage or injury. They usually don't do it, but if a critter came in and chewed this away, then that bulb would be done.
Gotcha. What about, I think you might have just answered, but if the bulb was stored vertically instead of horizontally, would that also be the same case?
Yeah, if it gets planted upside down, you just don't know with plants. I mean, they do have what we refer to as geotropism. There's where if it gets going upside down, believe it or not, the roots would be able to know, oops, to do a U-turn. The tip would know to do a U-turn because they literally sense gravitational pull that's in there. But I can't guarantee you how well it's going to do because it's going to stunt it, it's going to slow it down. But you know, plants got a will to live, and it's quite possible they'll still come up, but the flowers might be smaller, they might be later. You know, we want to avoid that and try to get it the pointy side up if we can.
Mm-hmm.
Another little thing, just because I keep showing this tulip because it's classic bulb. I love tulips, but you know, tulips, they actually diminish with time in our climate because they're better adapted to a cool climate. So each year, the very first year, you get your biggest and showiest flower. The second year, they start to decline. The third year, a little smaller. So a lot of times people, by the time you get 3 to 5 years into this, you might be looking at replacing them. One of the reasons why, again, I love daffodils. I'm showing right here. Daffodils, they're naturally rodent resistant. They're actually toxic if you were to eat it, you know, no problem handling it. But the rabbits and squirrels and deer don't bother these, and daffodils multiply and get bigger each year. So if you're looking for something that's really easy and foolproof, a lot of times I'll steer you towards daffodils.
Mm-hmm. Going back to squirrels again with eating the bulbs, would you recommend, if a squirrel is eating the tulips, would you recommend putting more down, or is that going to just kind of feed the fire of squirrels eating their bulbs?
I mean, my approach really is to plant something different. And on the tags and the labels and our staff, we can tell you which ones are more rodent resistant than others. You know, daffodils back as we like prior to tulip mania, I should be careful. I say I'm not recommending this, but people would eat tulips as an inexpensive available source of carbohydrates, just like you might eat a potato. But that's before they kind of started going up in cost. But way back, these even people would eat these. So if wildlife's a concern and you really want tulips, then you have to do one of these sprays or repellents. If you have more flexibility, you can do hyacinths, you can do daffodils, as I said, and I just say go for the easy stuff.
Mm-hmm. For that, the spray of the squirrel at the I Must Garden, would that also be usable with rabbits?
It is. This particular company, they make one a different repellent for rabbits than they do squirrels. But there are others out there. Like I brought this one in called Repelzol, just as an example, because want to get stuck on any one product, but Repelzol has a much broader label that includes rabbits and squirrels and deer. There's a couple others like Bob-X, Liquid Fence. There's several good choices. So I grabbed the squirrel repellent because I've used it. We've had good success. It's a great one. But if you have other issues, talk to us, and we've got other options available to you.
Gotcha. So another person was wondering if their bulbs will be okay in their cool basement for a few weeks until they can get out and dig holes for them.
Oh yes, if you're storing bulbs, the ideal conditions, the perfect conditions are about 50-55 degrees, so cool, dark location that's in there. And as long as you get them planted before Christmas, they'll do wonderfully. So there's no urgency on this.
Gotcha. We do have a lot more questions on bulbs. Do you want to continue, or do you want to finish it?
I'm going to go through my next slides. I'm going to do this really quick, I promise, about garden cleanup, and then we'll just go with questions throughout the rest of the show.
Okay.
So it's that time of year, like I said, we've had a freeze that's out there. A lot of plants have gone dormant. I was thinking, I wish I had taken a picture. I woke up this morning to a landscape crew, about a dozen guys going through my community, with blowers, removing the leaves. A lot of sites you'll see go back, trimming off, like here, the dormant grasses, basically just cleaning and tidying up everything, sort of putting it to bed for winter. And there's nothing wrong with that. Totally get it, especially here at sort of a commercial environment, and keeping everything sort of nice and clean and tidy is really what they're paid to do, and what most customers are looking for and expecting. But something that, I feel pretty strongly about, and I'm not alone, a lot of people are into this, is really trying to learn that having a little bit of a messy garden in the winter is a good thing in a lot of ways. It's good from a habitat perspective. So there's many different reasons you might leave this up here, but like if you can't see it, but this was an Amsonia that's got these stems up here. I think this is Coreopsis. Looks like, again, a decorative type grass here. But if we leave some of this debris behind, this is also shelter for a lot of beneficial insects. So if you like bumblebees, for example, bumblebees, the fertile queen, she tunnels down forms a little shallow winter hibernation area, oftentimes under sticks and leaves or an old log that's there. A lot of our native solitary bees will lay their eggs into the hollow stems and tubes that are there. And so when we have this plant material, or what I'm sometimes saying is debris, it's supporting a healthier habitat. So instead of this desire to clean and tidy up, if you can bring yourself where it's appropriate to leave some of that in place, you actually end up with a more natural environment, a place for wildlife and animals can actually kind of seek a little bit of shelter in the winter. So even like, evergreens, like, every year I get birds nesting in this little cryptomerias there. Again, leaving this stems and debris up there is also a source of seeds potentially for birds to feed on and eat. And I just personally think it's more attractive. It gives us some interest during the winter time. So there's no one answer for everybody. You got to sort of evaluate your own situation and circumstances that's there. But if you are doing your cleanup, if you're raking leaves, cutting stem back, and you're not sure what needs to cut back, what doesn't need to be cut back, you don't need to cut back anything. You can just leave it in place. The reason we cut these things back is just our own, I use somewhat compulsive need to have everything clean and tidy around us. So sometimes, again, like I live in a community, townhouse community, the HOA is going to come through, they're going to clean up the leaves and debris, and I just get to leave what I can behind. You might be in a more like formal commercial area where you need to keep that. But if you have more naturalized areas, I just wanted to say, just leave it alone, just leave it up there. And then I would rather we wait all the way until late March, maybe April, and we can always clean up that in spring. But by that time, hopefully we've had time for those animals to get through the winter time, have some habitat, and wait until they emerge in spring. So that's sort of my prepared comments. We only got a few minutes left, so now let's go back to our questions.
Okay. All right, going back here. Let's see, just going off of a for a cleanup question. If you leave the stems up all winter for perhaps bumblebees, etc., to overwinter nest, will they be killed when you chop and clean up in March?
It's there. The bees, a lot of the bees and the insects don't really become active until our temperatures are pretty consistently above 50 degrees. So it gets a little difficult, I'm going to say, sometimes spring, because in March, you could still have overwintering insects and larvae that's in there. So there's different ways of doing this. Some entomologists will tell you, and I think this is a good compromise, if you need to, go ahead and cut some of those stems down, but maybe you can just leave them lying in the garden, just cut them, but leave them lying there. So then the insects can complete their life cycle and emerge. Another approach is I've seen, again, these are professional PhD entomologists and stuff where they'll cut that, but they don't want to leave it lying in the garden, but they might take it and sort of place it, you know, if they have a naturalized area, place it sort of at the edge of the woods or something like that. Because like I said, the insects aren't really going to start coming out to our temperatures are consistently in the 50s, which isn't oftentimes till we're pretty well into April.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. For leaves, do you advise letting the leaves deteriorate over the mulch during the winter, or is it better to remove them now since they have to be removed in the spring to lay down before more mulch?
There's no absolute answers on this, but if you can allow the leaves to just stay in place, just leave them in place as they are. I recognize that, like if you have a lawn, you know, evergreen ground covers, some situations like that, you know, they may have to be raked off or moved or something like that. But if you can leave them on there through the winter time, that's good. You know, little salamanders in there, you know, I say it because I was like, wow, in my little townhouse community, I found a salamander earlier last spring. It's like, wow, there is some life here. So if you can leave them in there, leave them in. But you know, don't feel horrible if you need to clean them up either. I think there's a responsibility to the community and stuff. And so I'm going off on a tangent, but like sometimes I've literally had neighbors complain that my garden's in a mess, and I've gone out, I've talked to them a little bit saying, hey, there's a plan here, but I'll get it cleaned up for you as soon as I can. So, you know, however it works best for you.
Gotcha. Going back to the bulbs, a couple of different people are sharing or asking various things about either soaking their bulbs in Bob-X or surrounding their bulb with some sort of gravel. Do you have any thoughts on that, like ways to protect your bulbs from those critters and other things? I know we talked about bulbach and the spray and everything, but
yeah, so there's different ways of doing that. The Volblock, which is the little gravel that's in there, I've had, you know, very good success with that. I think it's a really nice product, and it's permanent. It's a one-shot deal. It's in the ground, all natural. So that's certainly a very good, viable option. And this is at the time you're planting. So when you're mixing this in the soil and making sure it's kind of under, around, and over the bulbs as a barrier, essentially it's in there. Bob-X, we have used that, and I mean, I've been here, like I said, 26 years ago, we were using Bob-X as a dip for the bulbs, where we would just dip them in there and just let them air dry and then plant them. That works beautifully. I think it's a little more economical if you're not doing a huge planting, just to buy repellent like this. You can put your bulbs out in newspaper, something, spray them, let it dry, then plant them. So yeah, I always say this is like cooking. Everybody's got their own recipe, their own way of doing it, and it all works.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Going back to cleanup and everything, will leaf mulch have the same effect as leaving the whole leaves down?
It's really nice if you are able, like when you say leaf mulch, I think that's been run over with a lawnmower, ground into smaller size sometimes that even means it's been aged a little bit. So that's really nice because if you do chop them up the lawnmower or something, I think they're less likely to blow away, kind of a bit less noticeable. With smaller particles like that, they're going to decompose faster. So yeah, if you're in an environment where you can literally mulch them with a lawnmower and then throw that back into the bed, that would be really ideal. Again, that's more work and effort goes into it, but otherwise, if you get big maple leaves or oak leaves, those things, they'll catch the wind, they blow, they don't always stay put.
Gotcha. Well, that was actually a perfect time, perfect question to end on, because we are now out of time. We did have a lot of questions left over, so I'm sorry that we weren't able to get through all of them. If your question wasn't answered and you really need to, you're really hankering for that question to be answered, feel free to either reach out to Sally at our email, or you can reach out through me through our contact us form on our website. David, I think so. When are we doing a plant clinic next? Not till after.
This is going to be it for the holidays. Like I said, we pretty much converted to a Christmas shop. It's getting cold outside, so this doesn't mean stop gardening. There's still plenty to do. Take advantage of the nice weather. Like I said, I just giving you a few things to keep you busy here. Come by the garden center. So we're definitely here to support the gardening. But for now, I'm just going to say happy holidays to everybody. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll pick up with the plant clinics again as soon as the sort of after the new year, I'm sure, when the holidays are behind us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to have some holiday webinars in the next, and maybe possibly a couple seminars in the next couple weeks for the Christmas or the holiday season. So please take a look on our website under our online classes and events tab, and sign up, because most of our events are going to be registration only, just to keep things as healthy and regulated as possible. But without any further ado, thank you guys for attending today, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.